My 32F husband 50 match response when I discussed sexual coercion in marriage. We have been together for 4 years, and for most of that time, I thought we had a solid foundation built on love, mutual respect, and understanding. However, recent changes in my life have deeply affected my emotional and physical needs, and it feels as though that foundation is beginning to crack. After giving birth to our child 20 months ago, experiencing significant hormonal changes, and coping with profound grief from the recent loss of 2 dear friends, my libido has naturally declined. It's not that I no longer love or desire my husband, but my body and mind are navigating through a period of immense stress and healing. Despite this, I felt increasing pressure from him regarding sex. Knowing that this issue needed to be addressed for the sake of our relationship, I gathered the courage to have an open and vulnerable conversation with him. I thought this would be an opportunity for us to connect, for him to understand where I'm coming from, and for us to find a way forward together. Instead, his responses left me feeling invalidated, betrayed, and utterly shattered. When I tried to explain my feelings and my struggles, here is how he responded. So I can only have sex when you want it and when you are going through ovulation? I am a man. I have needs. I'm supposed to come 21 days out of the month for prostate health. Sorry, I have needs and I'm in my peak before I lose my testosterone, which decreases every year. So many women do this to men, have so much sex in the beginning, and then make them beg for it later. I don't want to jack off all the time and watch porn, but you're basically telling me to do so. These words echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended. I had offered alternative forms of intimacy like cuddling, holding hands, or even just spending quiet, closed moments together without the expectation of sex. I had expressed my need to feel safe and connected emotionally, but his responses made it clear that my needs were secondary to his physical desires. He often dismisses my boundaries with comments like, "Well, isn't it a good thing I want you this badly? Come on, we used to do it all the time. You're just so hot." What makes this even more painful is that he knows my history. I have a traumatic past involving sexual abuse from my early childhood and an incident in my 20s. I have shared this with him, trusting that he would be gentle and considerate of my feelings. Yet his recent behavior has left me feeling as though my past trauma and current struggles don't matter to him. Last month, I faced one of the most difficult periods of my life. Within 12 hours, I lost 2 close friends, one to suicide and the other to murder. As if grieving wasn't enough, I have been juggling the demands of raising a toddler, maintaining our household, and managing my own mental health challenges. I am on the autism spectrum, ASD, and have complex PTSD, CPTSD, conditions I've been in therapy for years to address. Communication isn't easy for me, but I put every ounce of energy I had into bringing this topic up with kindness and vulnerability. Despite my efforts, the conversation felt like a complete failure. I want to emphasize that this issue didn't come out of nowhere. At the beginning of our relationship, and even up until our daughter was born, our sex life was incredibly active, daily, sometimes multiple times a day. Since giving birth, my libido has naturally decreased, but we still have sex 2 to 3 times a week, which I believe is reasonable. Yet I constantly feel pressured to give more, even when I'm not in the mood. This pressure makes it harder for me to feel connected or even safe during intimate moments. In the past, my husband has never been aggressive, violent, or physically abusive. However, his dismissive attitude towards my boundaries and his inability to empathize with my feelings are now causing significant harm to our marriage. I fear that this path, if left unchecked, could lead to something more damaging, like coercion. I explained this to him gently, hoping he would understand the seriousness of the issue. Instead, his shocking responses left me questioning everything. I came here to seek perspectives, advice, and reassurance. I hoped someone might offer suggestions or insights I hadn't considered before. I want to protect my marriage and create a space where both of us feel valued and respected. But right now, I feel lost, invalidated, and deeply hurt. Update 1. My best friend sat across from me in the cozy corner of a bustling cafe. The hum of conversations and the clinking of cups around us created a stark contrast to the intense, quiet tension at our table. Her eyes, filled with concern and determination, locked onto mine, as if willing me to see the truth I had been avoiding. "This is not a good relationship," she said firmly, her voice steady but low enough to blend into the cafe's noise. She leaned forward, her hands wrapped around the warm ceramic of her coffee cup. "Are you not concerned that an older man targeted you because of your age, your neurodivergence, and your history of trauma? These things make you vulnerable, and it sounds like he's taken advantage of that vulnerability." I glanced down at the untouched latte in front of me, the frothy heart on top slowly fading. Her words were heavy, cutting through the haze of denial I had been clinging to. The cafe around us felt like it had blurred into the background as her voice brought the harsh realities into focus. Sexual coercion is abuse, she continued, her tone softening but losing none of its intensity. I've heard this kind of behavior before. It starts with comments like, "I need it for my health." And before you know it, it becomes, "I need it so I don't get angry." And anger, in these cases, often escalates into something worse. You need to think long and hard about whether there are other abusive patterns in your relationship. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me as I tried to process what she was saying. Outside the cafe window, people bustled along the street, their lives seemingly uncomplicated compared to the turmoil inside me. I wanted to argue, to defend him, but I couldn't deny the sting of truth in her words. "All of this," she said, leaning in closer, her gaze unwavering. "Everything you've described, this is not normal behavior for someone who claims to love and respect you. He knows what he's doing is wrong. The problem isn't that he doesn't understand, it's that he doesn't care. He's pressuring you because it works for him. It gets him what he wants." The cafe's warm ambiance suddenly felt stifling. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my cup, hoping the sip of coffee would steady me. I had spent so much time rationalizing his behavior, convincing myself that I was the one who needed to change, to give more. But now, hearing her say these things aloud was like a spotlight illuminating all the red flags I had ignored. Her voice softened as she continued. "A man who truly loves and respects you would never make you feel like this. My husband has never pressured me after I said no, and he's never guilt-tripped me about it either. We've gone through tough times, depression, work stress, even long, dry spells, but he's never treated me the way your husband is treating you. That's not love, and it's not respect." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back, afraid of breaking down in the middle of the cafe. I managed to whisper, "But he says he loves me. He says he wants me because I'm beautiful, because I'm irresistible. Isn't that a good thing?" She shook her head, her expression both empathetic and resolute. "No, it's not. Love isn't about making someone feel pressured or guilty. Love is about respect. It's about understanding and supporting each other. What he's doing isn't love, it's manipulation. He's using your past, your vulnerabilities, and even your body against you, and you deserve so much better than that." Her words lingered in the air, mixing with the aroma of coffee and the faint chatter of the other patrons. I felt both exposed and understood in a way I hadn't expected. I had thought coming here would just be a way to vent, to share my frustrations. Instead, it felt like the walls I had built around myself were crumbling. "I'm so sorry this is happening to you," she said, her hand reaching across the table to grasp mine. Her touch was warm and steady, anchoring me in a moment where I felt like I might fall apart. "But you don't have to stay in this. You don't have to keep sacrificing your mental health and your sense of safety for someone who doesn't value you the way you deserve to be valued." The steam from my coffee rose in lazy swirls as I stared at her, unable to speak. My voice felt trapped in my throat, choked by a mix of shame, anger, and grief. "You're strong," she added, her grip on my hand tightening as if to pass some of her strength to me. "Stronger than you think. You've already been through so much and come out the other side. I hope you'll consider leaving him, not because it's easy, but because you deserve a relationship where you're loved and cherished for who you are, not just what you can give." Her words planted a seed of hope within me, though it was tangled with pain. Perhaps there was a way forward, a way to reclaim the parts of myself I had lost, a way to find peace. I wasn't ready to make a decision then and there, but for the first time in a long time, I felt the possibility of freedom, of love that didn't come with conditions. And in that little cafe, surrounded by the simple noise of life, I realized I might still have the strength to fight for the life I deserved. Update 2. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the echoes of my best friend's words replayed in my mind. The cafe conversation had left me both shaken and resolute. I couldn't keep avoiding the truth, and I couldn't continue living in silence. My husband needed to hear how his actions had been affecting me, and I needed to see if there was any hope for our relationship. When he came home, exhausted from work, I was waiting for him on the couch. I took a deep breath as he entered the room, loosening his tie and giving me a tired smile. "We need to talk," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the nervous tremor in my chest. His smile faltered, replaced by a slight frown. "Is this about the other night?" he asked, already defensive. "Yes," I replied, my tone calm but unwavering. "And more than just the other night, it's about us, about how I've been feeling and how your responses have made me feel invalidated, pressured, and frankly deeply hurt." He sat down across from me, leaning back in the chair with his arms crossed. "I thought we already talked about this," he said, a hint of irritation in his voice. "I've explained my side. I'm not sure what else there is to say." I felt my pulse quicken, but forced myself to stay composed. "You explained your side, yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "But you didn't hear mine. I tried to open up to you about something incredibly vulnerable, about how I'm feeling overwhelmed, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and instead of listening, you dismissed my feelings and turned the conversation into something about you." He shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tapping on the armrest. "Look, I didn't mean to upset you, but I have needs too," he said, his tone growing defensive. "You're acting like I'm some kind of monster for wanting intimacy with my wife." "It's not about you wanting intimacy," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's about the way you've been handling it. The pressure, the guilt tripping, the comments about how I'm not the same as I used to be. It's all hurtful. I've been trying to communicate with you to make you understand that I need space and time to feel comfortable again. But instead of respecting that, you've made me feel like I'm failing you." His brow furrowed and he let out a frustrated sigh. "What am I supposed to do then? Just sit around and wait? It feels like I'm being punished for something I didn't do." I felt a surge of anger but kept my tone measured. "This isn't a punishment," I said. "This is me asking for respect and understanding. I've been through so much, physically after childbirth, emotionally with the loss of my friends, and mentally with my past trauma. You know all of this, and yet, instead of supporting me, you've made it about your needs and what you're not getting. Do you realize how invalidating that is?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "I'm not trying to invalidate you," he muttered. I don't know how to handle this. You're not the same person you used to be, and I feel like I'm losing you." His words hit me like a wave. For a moment, I softened, understanding that beneath his defensiveness was fear. But that fear didn't excuse his behavior. "I'm not the same person I used to be," I admitted, my voice gentler now. "But neither are you. Life changes us, and relationships are supposed to grow and adapt. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to respect my boundaries and stop treating intimacy as something owed." There was a long silence between us, the tension in the room almost palpable. Finally, he looked back at me, his expression a mix of frustration and guilt. "I didn't realize I was making you feel like this," he said, his voice quieter now. "I thought I was just being honest about how I feel." "Honesty isn't the problem," I said. "The problem is how you've used that honesty to pressure me, to make me feel like I'm not good enough as I am. If we're going to fix this, you need to understand that respect and empathy have to come first." He nodded slowly, but his expression didn't fill me with confidence. "I'll try," he said, though the words felt hollow. I realized then that change wouldn't happen overnight, if it happened at all. This conversation was only the beginning, and whether or not our marriage could survive depended on whether he truly understood the damage he had done. As he left the room to get ready for bed, I stayed on the couch, staring at the darkened window and wondering if I had the strength to keep fighting for something that felt so broken. For now, I had said my piece, and I would give him time to reflect. But deep down, I knew that if he couldn't change, I would have to make the hardest decision of my life, for my own well-being and the future I wanted for myself and my child. Update 3. In the days following my confrontation with my husband, I realized that my hope for his change was nothing more than an illusion. He returned to his old habits, offering sweet words only when he wanted something from me. The pressure remained, my boundaries continued to be ignored, and I felt myself shrinking more and more within my own home. I had done everything I could. I spoke, I explained, I pleaded for him to understand, but every time, his eyes carried a look of exhaustion as if I was bothering him. Instead of listening, he reverted to the same worn-out arguments, that he had needs, that he deserved a wife who would satisfy him as before. I was exhausted. His justifications no longer broke my heart. They only left me feeling hollow. My little daughter, Raquel, was the only thing keeping me strong during those days. Watching her run around our small home, her smile as bright as the sun, I reminded myself that I had to be strong for her. But deep down, I knew that one day she would grow up and notice the quiet tension between her parents. I didn't want her to grow up in an environment where oppression was disguised as false love. Then, one evening, after a long day when I no longer had the strength to argue, I decided to pack a few basic items for myself and Raquel. I knew I had to leave, even though my heart ached at the thought of leaving behind such a significant part of my life. But I also knew that if I stayed, I would slowly lose myself. I left a short note on the table with no tears, no accusations, just a simple, clear goodbye. I tried, but I can't keep going like this. I hope you will understand and change, but I can't wait for that any longer. I need to do what's best for myself and Raquel. Wishing you all the best. As I walked out the door, Raquel slept soundly in my arms. I didn't look back because I knew that if I did, I might not have the strength to move forward. I found refuge in a place where I could start over, far from the pressure and pain I had endured for so long. The road ahead was full of challenges and uncertainty, but I knew that, whatever path I chose, I had made the right decision to protect myself and my daughter. Update 4. A year had passed since I left the house I once called home. Life wasn't easy, but step by step, I rebuilt everything. Raquel was growing up healthy, and I had learned to live freely, unbound by unreasonable pressures or emotional torment. I now had a stable job, a small but cozy home, and most importantly, I had found myself again. One day, while taking Raquel to the park, I unexpectedly saw him, the man I had once loved, but who had also caused me so much pain. He stood under a large tree, looking thoughtful as his gaze followed another family playing together. Time had changed him. His face was thinner, and his eyes no longer held the confidence they once did, but I couldn't deny that seeing him made my heart ache, stirring up bittersweet memories. He saw me. In that moment, it felt like both of us froze amid the bustling crowd around us. Raquel tugged at my hand and asked softly, "Mom, is that Dad?" I nodded gently, trying to muster a reassuring smile. He walked toward us slowly, as if afraid that moving too fast would shatter the moment. When he reached us, he looked at Raquel with eyes full of regret. "You've grown so much," he said, his voice hoarse as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. Raquel hesitated for a moment, then suddenly grabbed his hand. "I missed you," she said softly, her eyes sparkling with a mix of joy and shyness. That moment left me speechless. He looked at me, his eyes filled with things he wanted to say. "I tried to find you, but I didn't know where to start," he admitted. "This past year, I've thought about everything. I know I hurt you, and I know I can't change what happened, but I want to say I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart." His apology eased some of the weight in my heart, but it wasn't enough to erase the past. I nodded and replied, "I accept your apology, but the past cannot be undone. Raquel and I have built a stable life, and I don't want to disrupt that." We sat down on a nearby bench as Raquel ran off to play with other children. He shared what had happened over the past year, how he had attended therapy, faced his mistakes, and worked on changing. "I don't expect full forgiveness," he said, "but I hope to start over with Raquel and be a better father." I looked at him, my heart heavy. Part of me wanted to refuse, to keep my distance to protect my daughter, but when I looked at Raquel, I knew she needed her father in her life. I said slowly, "I'll let you see Raquel, but only if you truly prove that you've changed." He nodded, his eyes lighting up with hope. "I'll do everything I can to make it right," he promised. As the sun began to set, I stood up and called for Raquel. She ran over, grabbing my hand on one side and his on the other. That image made me realize that, despite the pain of the past, the future might still hold better things if we both tried for our daughter. We left the park, going in different directions. But this time, I didn't feel sadness or anger, I only felt peace. Because I knew that whatever the road ahead might bring, I had done the right thing for myself and for Raquel.